Hey folks, welcome to Free Press Sports with Carlson Shawn. Carlson, it's my turn to be on the road, although I'm not in Florida like you were. I am in Minneapolis. It's overcast today, but yesterday it was sunny and 67 degrees, and we're in mid-March. It's hard to know what to make of this. But then again, Michigan's here. Carlos, having won 3 Big Ten games in the regular season. Michigan State's here. Almost, you can't say 100%, but needing a win to feel okay about their NCAA chances next week. So maybe it's not just the warming up that's tilting the axis here, making this all feel strange. Meanwhile, you're back from Florida, where you were covering baseball and writing about spring training. You know, I'm obviously here for college basketball, but we're not going to talk about either one of those because it's all about the Lions. It always is about the Lions. And free agency started, and they went and got your cornerbacks, not quarterbacks. And I want to know what you have to think about what they've done so far. And by the way, hi.
Oh, hi, Shawn. Yeah, I'm sure you're enjoying the nice weather in Minneapolis and getting hotel room service in your 5-star luxury spot that you're at. But I stayed in a room it was like the Harry Potter under the stairs room with Jeff Seidel and Evan Petzold. So not quite the same accommodations, but lovely roommates for a few days. Yeah, it was not. I wasn't thrilled. And then yes, Brad Holmes told us what he was going to do, and Brad Holmes stayed true to it. I'm not going to go spend a lot of money in free agency on a splash free agent. It's easy to win the headlines in March, all this stuff. They got more help at cornerback with a couple of dudes, but they're not stars. Maybe one of them. I mean, it's Carlton Davis should be right now. He's expected to be their number one outside cornerback. Comes from Tampa Bay, where I think the last time we saw him, he was getting trucked by Craig Reynolds in that playoff game in Porterfield. So I think he missed several games last year with injury. So I think that something that, you can try. Brad Holmes deserves a lot of trust for what he's done, how he's helped build this team, being probably more careful than taking a chance. But things may be changing now. I don't know if you can apply the same logic all the time. If you're rebuilding, if you're starting anew, first time really head coach, first time general manager, whole new team, whole new front office, you're taking over, you have to sort of, cull the roster from the previous regime, all that stuff that goes on the first couple of years. And then we saw them take this big leap in the third year. And I think when you're a Super Bowl contender, which the Lions definitely are, some of that has to change. And at least in the first wave of free agency, I was hoping for more, but, Holmes stayed true to what he said he would do, and he's not going to go spend a lot of money, even though they have the cap room on high price free agent. Now, we don't know. Was the asking price too much for L'Jarius Sneed from the Chiefs? I don't know if Chris Jones was ever going to shake loose their defensive tackle, but he was a modest spender in the first so far in the first wave of free agency. I don't think that's going to change. But what did you think? Did you like the moves? I'm sure you did. You're going to find a way to justify it.
There's no justify it or not justifying. This is what's so comical to me. Okay. First of all, and I get it, and it's fun and it's fodder, and you listen. I've heard folks on radio. I've seen other people make an argument. Nobody's infallible. This is what you do. This is what sports all about. I get all that, but let's have some context, please. Let's stay in reality. This is always my thing. Let's stay in reality. The teams that spent the most money in free agency last year, of the top, 6 or 7 teams, I saw this somewhere, none of them made the playoffs. Kansas City's won the last 2 Super Bowls. They have not made a free agent signing with a star. You could say, okay, how about the Los Angeles Rams? Well, that's a quarterback. And that was a trade, and that's fine. It was an offseason move. But is that a little bit different? How about Tampa? They didn't go out and get any big free agent signing except for Tom Brady. But again, that's a quarterback. Do you count the quarterback? Because people that have gone out and spent on linebackers, cornerbacks, safeties, defensive edge rushers, they've not won Super Bowls. It just doesn't work like that. Reggie White's probably the most famous example, and that was in the 90s. I'm sure I'm missing somebody, but people act like you go spend money and you win Super Bowls, and you do not for the most part. So what's the logic? That's because history tells us it doesn't mostly work. So what is it? Just the chance? Is it the psychology of it? Is it, oh, we got to go get this guy to have the best chance? I mean, maybe, but why do you think people are so passionate? Now, I get not all fans are like that. Some fans are maybe too far the other way. They're like, oh, I'm not going to question anything the general manager does if the general manager's been on a roll. And I understand, not wanting to go too far that way. But why do you think people are so passionate about something when the reality says something different? And I don't mean you. I just mean fans.
Yeah. I mean, reality is not really reality. It's all perspective. You can you say whatever you want. It's like statistics. You torture a statistic long enough, it'll tell you what you want to know. You look at something the way you want to look at it, you'll find what you want. I mean, the Rams, like you brought, Matthew Stafford, right? But they also added Jalen Ramsey, and they also added Von Miller, late in the season at the trade deadline. I mean, so the comparison there to me is, I don't think, if you're talking about wholesale free agency, we're just going to load up guy after guy. I agree with you. I don't think that is, the way to win.
Would be, San Francisco, to your point, would be the best example of that, and they can't get over the hump. No, that's not cause and effect. I get it, but go ahead. Sorry.
But yeah, and so to me, I think, the way that fans, if you're saying the fans are getting upset about this, and I think it's because if you watch the game, especially the way they lost that last game, they lose by 3 points. That's when you see the problem. You see that Cam Sutton's getting burned, the secondary is getting burned, the cornerbacks, are struggling. They're not getting pressure up front on Brock Purdy. That is almost the definition of one player away. If you'd had another defensive end who could put pressure, maybe, or if you'd had someone like that, or a defensive tackle up the middle, causes a sack fumble, they pick it up, they get a short field, they score a touchdown, they win that game, and they're in the Super Bowl. Someone gets a pick, a cornerback makes a big play or a pick or jars the ball loose or whatever, returns a little bit, short field, touchdown field, they won the game. That's what you're talking about. You're talking about fans are seeing this. They've seen it all year long last season, right? Is the quarterback play was not good, and they just couldn't get pressure unless they relied on the blitz. And you can bet, Shawn, that this year, I don't think Aaron Glenn's going to be able to get away with just blitzing so much. And, they have a new defensive line coach, and we'll see what he brings. And they're adding some pieces up front. Who knows what the draft brings? But I don't think you can just keep blitzing, because teams figure that out. If they know soon enough what's happening, they look at all the film, like, you can beat the blitz. So they need help. Now, what Brad Holmes is betting on is, I'm going to be smart enough to add reasonably priced either free agents or obviously draft picks, and figure a way around it without having to spend big and without compromising the future, so that we can keep building and building, and this can be sustainable for years and years. I don't think adding one high-priced free agent, either as a cornerback or as a edge rusher, defensive tackle, or whatever, somewhere on the defensive line, I don't think that is mortgaging your future. I think it can be done. So that's what I was hoping for. And I certainly don't want them to, I think the window is now, but it should continue for a while. Even if they lose Ben Johnson, there should be a reasonable, if they keep Jared Goff, if they keep they have enough pieces that are going to be there for a while. The window should be reasonable for the next, handful of years. But right now, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more urgency from Brad Holmes to open the checkbook.
Yeah, I don't understand. I really don't. There's just not a long history of that working. There's just not. I mean, that's a
one
fact.
guy. One guy.
Yeah, no, there's not a long history of that working. You know what else? Would have led to a win? Josh Reynolds holding on to a ball. Jahmyr Gibbs going the wrong way on a fumble. And let's play that out. If he doesn't go the wrong way and they fumble, I don't know if they would have. Maybe they get stopped 10 yards later, but maybe they don't. Maybe they keep moving the ball, and maybe it's 2, 3, 4 minutes off the clock. Maybe Reynolds holds on to the ball. That I hate to pin it on him. There were other issues, but I mean, you could argue that too. Now, are they going to beat the Chiefs? Probably not. But they were good enough to win with what they had, and that's what they look at, right? They look at, all right, if we were good enough to win with what they had, which they were, then what do? Do you say, I've got a lot of young guys and I believe in some of these young guys and we can get better and we can if we're just a little bit better at cornerback, does that make a difference? Do our young guys grow? Do our safeties get better? Do our do our linebackers get better? Especially the young guy in Campbell. I don't know. I mean, but that's just as much. I mean, these are all unknowns, but that makes just as much sense, right? Based on how the NFL's worked, that makes just as much sense. It's a gamble either way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and you know what? I'll give Brad Holmes this much credit. You know, he either doesn't care or he's willing to take the heat, even though he obviously, clapped back at, people like me and, who were critical of some of his decisions and picks, whatever. And, don't forget when he got I think when he drafted St. Brown, he was like, well, hope, people get off my ass now, and he said that in a press conference, like he knows the heat, he feels the heat, but he's willing kind of ignore it to some extent and do what he thinks is right. And I give him credit for his conviction, but and I also give him credit for not wanting to just win the headlines and win, whatever, the PR battle. But sometimes you have to look, kind of realign or refocus what your goal is and what you can do, what you need to do. Because like I said, starting in the first year or two of a rebuild versus now, and it's come quick, tons of credit for him and Dan Campbell, but they're in a different spot now, and I think the problem is that, yeah, it's not about just that game and that who did this and who turned the wrong way, whatever. It's like, no. Reynolds is a journeyman receiver. Okay. He's not, he's going to make mistakes and going to have drops, whatever. Gibbs was really good all season. That was not, it was like, what have been the problems all season that we've seen? It was lack of pressure up front and deficient quarterback play, outside quarterback play. Those were the big problems all season. And they continued. That wasn't the only reason they obviously lost, but at least if you had that, if you could point to that, like, let's just play this out. If we don't know what's going to happen to the draft. Let's just say nothing major. They don't trade up into the top 15 or something like that. They just stay at, 29 or whatever. They have a, late second round pick, whatever, it kind of goes chalk. And they had some, young players, whatever. And some of them were good. Some of them were not, whatever, pretty average. Draft for them, if they struggle again at quarterback and up front, getting pressure, people are really not going to be happy because it's going to be like, well, what did you do? And you also have the trade deadline where you could do something, but he didn't last year, did absolutely nothing other than get Donovan Peoples-Jones. And by the way, I don't know, Brad Holmes should have his license revoked for adding, free agent receivers, because I just don't think he understands what you need to do to get these guys, but the right guys. But he needs to be able to defend that in some way. And you can't just say, well, we're building. Like, you're not building anymore. You're there. You built. It's time to win the Super Bowl or get to the Super Bowl. What are those? And Shawn, you say this too. The little differences now, the margins, that's where you win now.
It's all little about things. That's what it's all about.
And you want to see that. You want to see Jack Campbell develop. You want to see the young guys develop. But right now is like, you're not going to be in a better window with Ben Johnson here, with Jared Goff playing well, with Laporte, all the way down the line. You lost Jonah Jackson. It's the only person really of significance that you've lost right now. And you can replace an interior offensive line, especially guard. But your time is now. And this is obviously barring injury and all that stuff. But you got to do it. You got to, if not now, win.
That's a good place to take a break. I'll answer that question when we return with more Free Press Sports with Carlson Shawn. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlson Shawn. Coach, you make a good point off the air course, which is usually when your best points are made. Minneapolis. You've never been to Minneapolis. It's your kind of place. There's a tiny bit of counterculture, although you could say most places in the United States are not, their counterculture has been replaced with Lululemon, and I understand that. That's a fair argument. But no, seriously, the reason you'd love Minneapolis, first of all, it's got folks from all over the place, all over the world, and that's cool. But the neighborhoods, there's just so many great neighborhoods. And in some of these neighborhoods you're driving down, it's, it's kind of there's a working class town, part of town. I mean, not part of town, but it's just it's a mix of a lot of things. My favorite part of these 2-story kind of Midwestern homes in these old neighborhoods. And then there's a corner and there's a little tiny market and there's a bar, just an old bar or whatever. Now, some of these neighborhoods, some of those little spots have been replaced with, you know how it goes, right? Gentrified restaurants and all that sort of thing. But there's still some of that old mini, and I love that. Plus, any town that produces the replacements and prints and Husker Du is not a bad town. In fact, last night I was out. Excuse me. I don't want to put a date on it because who knows when people are going to listen to this. We know at least one person will listen to it. But I was getting some food at a little sort of Malaysian, Vietnamese street food place, just kind of a little casual spot. And I heard Controversy come on by Prince. And I remember when I was young when that came out, and I hadn't heard that. And I said to the guy taking care of me at the bar, I don't think I've ever heard Prince while I was in Minneapolis. It was kind of cool. He said, Charles, we don't we don't hear him so much around here anymore. And it was obviously a shock when it happened and all that. But maybe the young people are moving on from Prince. I don't know. Who knows? Speaking of which, do you want to know when the Lions are ever going to really try to chase the Super Bowl? You're not buying that that's what they're doing. You think they have some kind of devious way to just be good but not great and keep the fans full of false hope, buying beer, coming to the games, filling out Ford Field.
I think it's a mission statement in the lobby. It's printed there, yeah, but
all part of a master plan is what you think, right? That's funny. I think that they got a little bit better. I mean, you mentioned Carlton Davis. I mean, yes, he's not L'Jarius Sneed, but he's a decent cornerback, and he'll be there if he can stay healthy. That's a big one. That's another thing. Holmes likes taking chances on guys. And I know that's a narrative. He likes taking chances on guys that have been hurt. But how many players in the NFL have not been hurt? Again, it's one of those things you don't really, right? Almost every player has. Just to some degree, almost every player has an injury history. I mean, not everyone, but so
right after the last season, they've been hurt the last season. It's like, sounds good.
Yeah, well, most guys don't go more than a couple of years without getting hurt, right? So if it's not last season, it's the season before. I mean, I'm being silly a little bit, but there's some truth to that. It's like, well, why does he sign players to get hurt? Okay, well, who doesn't get hurt in the NFL? I mean, it's one of those things. But no, I believe that they think they can just get a little bit better. And with Carlton Davis, and it'll help Cam Sutton, and then they've got to bank on the young guys. I see they've got DJ Reader, the defensive tackle from Cincinnati, who's really good, one of the best run tackles in the league. Although McNeil's one of the best run tackles in the league too. So does that get you pressure on the quarterback? I mean, it makes it harder to run the ball, and I know that's important. But James Houston coming back. I mean, they picked up the fellow from Minneapolis. His name escapes me. I'm trying to. So Amik Robertson is the cornerback from Oakland. Davis from Tampa. Do you remember the defensive? This is terrible. His name escapes me. That they signed the defensive lineman from Minnesota. He's been hurt too, by the way. I can't think of his name. I'm sorry about that. And that's really our producer's fault, Robin Chan. He should have had us prepared for that. But anyway, so yeah, is he making moves around the margins? Kind of. Davis is not. That's a solid move. And then we'll see if Hutchinson gets better and if anybody else grows on the defensive line. I know that's important, Carlos. For me though, it's you're talking about the draft. I'd be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked if they took an offensive lineman in the first round, because that's the bread and butter of this team. Nothing works without that.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. It's just yes and no.
We got time.
I hate drafting interior offensive linemen in the first round, but picking so late if they stay at 29, it's not. When you lose Jonah Jackson, I think it was the right thing to let him go. I think his deal averaged something like $17 million or something. So that's way too much. And they re-signed Glasgow for, I don't know, $6 or $7 million a year for 3 years. So I think that was the right move. Let Jackson go, re-sign Graham. He's got position versatility, can play center. But I will say I normally hate drafting interior offensive lineman late or anywhere in the first round, but you don't know what's going to happen with Frank Ragnow. That guy just does not have a lot left with all this injury history. So you need to prepare for that eventuality that I think if they get this year out of him, they should be happy, and I doubt he's going to play 2 more years, but you should prepare for that. So if you got to draft a guy, 29th and he's a, guard center, yeah, he can play guard for you and then move to center if he needs, when Ragnow's gone.
Do you think this is a conspiracy? Do you think this is a conspiracy? All the moves and free agents just so they could take a guard center in the first round of the NFL?
No.
Is that what's going on?
No,
they're trying to mess with you, Carl. It's all about you. They're trying to mess with you. You mentioned earlier Brad Holmes was taking shots at people like you. He was definitely taking shots, and he mentioned Dave Burkett. But what really galled him about the last draft is that he heard it from the national NFL cognoscenti, right? All the pseudo-intellectual types that break film down all over the country, they thought, what are you doing taking a linebacker? What are you doing taking a running back? So he heard that from all over the NFL world, right? And he built that up, and then unleashed it on the local guys.
That's right, because nobody's there. If Peter King ever showed up, maybe, I don't know, whoever criticized him. I don't know.
No, but I think it's a conspiracy, Carlos. It's to mess with you. They've made all these moves, so now they can justify taking a guard center.
Clearly. Yeah.
In the late first round.
Yeah, I don't see that. When you're picking so low, unless he moves up, I think he's pretty safe with whatever he does. It's just hard to, nail picks that late. And he was obviously willing to trade. Forget what he traded for. Was it Robinson? Or was it Davis? I forget who he traded, but he was willing to trade some draft capital. So he obviously believes in them. He didn't trade the world, but I think a 3rd round pick and maybe a
third round pick for Davis. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's reasonable. I would like to think that, they have a strong plan. I'm sure they do for the draft. And this, dovetails with what they're going to do in the draft. But I don't see, you can find great cornerbacks in the draft. You can find a great, all-time great quarterback with the 199th pick. You can do this. And maybe the draft is more of Holmes' strong suit rather than free agency, because he hasn't really nailed free agency. He hasn't done much. He hasn't, most of the moves he's made, maybe that has something to do with it. And he's never going to stand up saying, hey, we don't do well in free agency, guys. Sorry. That's just not our thing. I mean, look at Graham Glasgow, right? I mean, they're re-signing him. He was a Bob Quinn draft pick, he didn't even pick him. He didn't pick most of that offensive line, draft him or sign him, whatever, but
he was a free agent. Glasgow was a free agent, right?
He was a free agent, but he already had, franchise familiarity with, Hank Fraley and all that stuff. So, but the receivers he's added, the cornerbacks he's added, there haven't been that many. The guys that have worked out have been the guys that they played with, and, guys like Anzalone, right? Guys that they personally worked with and played with and coached, So, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you're not going to be, if you're going to be great at one thing, be great at the draft rather than free agency. I would totally make that deal, but maybe that's just a deficiency for Holmes and his personnel staff. And they're just willing to say, listen, we'll plug some holes. We're not going to take giant swings in free agency because we just don't feel that confident about it. And we don't want to overspend or get the wrong guy. And then we're on the hook. Why did you sign this guy? He's a bust and whatever. And this way our draft picks, they have time to work out. And think about it. One of his big busts is Levi Onwuzurike. Nobody talks about it. People don't talk about when I think when you draft somebody, there is pressure. I mean, Jeff Okudah, right? Tease Tabor, they took a lot of heat, the Eric Ebrons. But if you're not a high first round pick, or even a first round pick at all, if you're in the second round, whatever, people tend to disregard it. You don't get that much criticism over it. There should be a lot more criticism for missing on Onwuzurike, but there just isn't. So maybe that's part of the equation too. Is you can skate by with a miss in the draft.
Yeah, there are a few things here. Of course, there is. I mean, that last point. Let's unpack a couple of things. No fan unless they're just completely untethered from this planet, expects any general manager to hit every single pick. So you have some wiggle room. So if you hit on a couple of picks, and the best GMs, what are their rate? I remember doing this a couple of years ago, looking at the teams that had won the Super Bowl and that sort of thing, and how they were built and how many they hit. Seattle arguably had the best run of draft luck there for a while when they were really good. And they hit on a couple of picks a year, like 3 years in a row. So they got six, seven players, 8 players, all of whom turned out to be really, really good. That's the calculus. That's the math. I mean, that's the percentage. And I think fans understand that. So they're not going to kill him for Levi because of how many other players he's found in the last 3 years. And they know that it's well above first of all, where the Lions were. And second of all, that's why Holmes won the Executive of the Year. So they understand that. So if he had a bunch of Levi's, then yeah, he would hear about it.
One thing that definitely that Holmes gets credit for and that helps with the psychology of all that is when you've had some amazing picks like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Laporta, when you've had absolute grand slam picks like that, the fans disregard the misses more. But still, a high second round pick that's a complete bust. I mean, that's not good, especially when you need that position. You were counting on that position, and it's been a problem for you because you haven't addressed it. Really, you tried, but it just hasn't worked out. So he should be getting more heat.
Why should he though?
And you could take some of that heat off.
Why should
somebody.
he? The best general managers in the league don't do that.
Some heat.
No, but they don't just give people passes. But the best general managers in the NFL don't do that. Nobody does it. So you're asking Holmes to stay to a standard that no other GM has ever done. Really, every general manager is going to miss, and they're not going to pay for it if they keep hitting. That same draft, by the way, they found a defensive tackle who's one of the best run stoppers in the league, and who's still not done getting better. I don't think it'll Lee McNeil. That's another reason he's not paying for Levi. Is McNeil has turned into a really good player, right? So that gives him cover too. It's really interesting that I'm with you on the psychology, but again, I think it's a percentage. As far as free agency, real quick, I don't think it's a lack of confidence. I just don't think that's how they want to build the team. And again, they know how the NFL works, and they see the teams that spend a lot of money. It doesn't guarantee squat, and sometimes it gets in the way if you got a young team and you're trying to build something. So that's the path they're taking. We'll see if it works. I'm with you. If they lose again next year and the first round of the playoffs or whatever, and they were on the road and they were in a wild card and they didn't win the division, and it was because there were 4 or 5 games where they couldn't get a stop in the fourth quarter, you're right. People will say, you brought this on yourself. You arrogant whatever. You know what I mean? You thought you had the feel, and this is what happened. He will absolutely and deservedly take the heat if that's what happens.
I'm interested to see what happens when they got the new defensive line coach. I want to say his name's Terrell Williams. Usually when you add a new coach like that, you kind of give them some ammunition, and that's where I think it might be interesting to see what they do in the draft, give him something to work with, because Hutchinson needs help, so it's got to come from somewhere. I don't know if these guys, the guy they signed, the guy they're bringing in for the visit, whatever, maybe the draft.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, maybe the draft. I mean, but I think, there was some issue there of why you made that change, why you fired several people on your defensive staff, brought in new people, and you can't just bring in new people and say, we'll kind of work with, what you have already. You got to do something. And I'm sure the scheme will change a little bit. Some of the strategy, Glenn and his blitzing and whatever. So you should expect some changes. So that usually means that there are upgrades. But are they just kind of modest upgrades, or are you going to spend money or, make some moves in the draft to get those typically more premium players the higher you draft?
No, it's totally interesting what you're saying. And that's another thing about these guys. They believe in their own development. They believe in their own guys for sure that they take, but they also believe in the coaches and the development. And I think that's probably the biggest reason they made the move. Maybe they feel like there's more to give. They got a couple of guys with some gifts. One in particular who's not shown, they hadn't gotten anything out of himself at all. And so maybe, and I'm thinking of Pascal, maybe there's nothing more to give. That's possible. But I would bet you anything, one of the reasons they brought the defensive line coach in is because let's see what you can do with that. It really is amazing. Really is amazing how much coaching matters. And I don't want to go down a basketball rabbit hole, but just for our listeners, I heard a snippet.
But you will.
No, because it's interesting. I heard a snippet the other day from two Michigan guys talking about coaching, and this had to do with the NBA. But Draymond Green had Isaiah Thomas on his podcast recently, and they were talking about coaching and the way Steve Kerr changed the Golden State Warriors and what Chuck Daly did with the Pistons and how he used pieces. And Isaiah Thomas, whatever else you think of him, is a basketball kind of savant, right? And one of the best players who's ever played. And he was talking about how, even in the NBA, how much coaching matters. I had a conversation with my son the other day. It was at a high-level state high school basketball game with high-level Division I guys on it. And he called me on the way home and he said, there's this one kid who could do this, but he wasn't used this way. And I didn't understand why the staff wasn't trying to get him shots this way and moving. I don't want to get all whatever, but it was interesting. And coaching matters a lot. And whether they're foolish to double down on that, but I know they believe in that. And that's a big part of this too. We'll see if it's enough. You might be right. It may not be.
Maybe. You need good coaching, but I don't think you believe in your coaching staff that much if you fired like 5 guys on your defensive staff to develop these guys. If you want to, maybe they're laying blame on, hey, why didn't this guy come along? Why didn't, we're not getting enough, out of the Aquara brothers. We didn't get anything out of, Onwuzurike, or he was hurt, but we didn't develop, I don't know, whatever it might be. Was it the chicken or the egg, right? Was it the player? Was it the coaching? There's, I think, to me in the NFL, very few coaches make that much of a difference. These guys they're pros, they're maybe the first couple of years, how you develop them and whatever, but sometimes you can't help them. Jeff Okudah, right? You're not going to make him a faster player, and he's already smart, but why is it not clicking? He's a guy who's committed, but got all the right coaching, got all the help, whatever, but it just never worked. And, I think that generally, the old adage has been always like 3 years. In 3 years, what a player is going to be. It rarely varies from that. If they're going to be really good, they're already pretty good, and you can see the upward progress. If they're not good after 3 years, it's generally not going to suddenly hit some magical, oh, I got the right coaching and now I'm great, or I wasn't being used the right way. It happens sometimes, but generally, and usually, after 2 years, really, you kind of see who the player is, barring any weird stuff like, massive injuries. But I think that, certainly that's the hope, is maybe they have a better mix of coaches, maybe whatever, the scheme changes a little bit. It could happen, but is Pascal, going to get 10 sacks? Is Houston going to get back to what he was? Maybe.
Hard to know. Probably not with Pascal, right? With Houston, yeah. He's undersized Houston, though, too, right? Maybe. So does that make him a little bit more vulnerable out there?
It's also, I think, part of the Houston thing is sometimes you see this with people who put up some of these sack numbers, like Kerry Hyder was a good example. It was like they come out of nowhere, nobody expects it, and it's hard to scheme when you don't have a lot of tape on somebody, what they've done. Pascal did as a rookie, you don't expect it. It's harder to stop once you see the tape and what they do and their tendencies and all that stuff. You can plan for that, and you can.
Wait! Are you saying coaching makes a difference? That's coaching.
Yeah, that sure does. In that sense,
in every
strategy, of course,
in every sense.
But making somebody a much better player.
No, you can't make anybody faster
from one coach.
You can't make anybody faster.
Now there are. The Ben Johnson, right? I'm president of the Ben Johnson fan club. What he did to Jared Goff, or what he did for Jared Goff, is amazing. It's why he's such a hot commodity. But that can happen, and it's just not super.
By the way,
common thing to have exceptional coaching.
Just for the record, DJ Chark had some pretty productive weeks. He was an important part of that late season surge 2 seasons ago when they finished at 9-8. He was good down the stretch. he struggled for sure, but to the point where I know some Lions fans were worried about losing him because he was really good down the stretch. And that's really the only receiver I can think of that Brad Holmes has had any success with at all. But it wasn't like he was a big high-priced guy, right? I mean, it wasn't.
He's $10 million. He was a high-priced guy.
Well, no, I mean,
3 touchdowns and 500 yards that season.
He wasn't a $20 million guy, but right. I mean,
$10 million is a lot for
for sure. But he was pretty good down the stretch. He had some injury luck, and that's to me the biggest thing about Holmes and his free agent signings. So many of them have had injury struggles, and so many of them have gotten here a year after they've been hurt. To your point, that's the thing.
There's just been so many missed, Marvin Jones and Brashard Perryman and all guy after guy after guy.
That's just
free agent
filling out a roster, right? By the way, speaking of somebody taking a big, and we don't need to talk about him a lot right now, but I think Jameson Williams is going to take that third-year leap. A lot of guys take the third year. Chris Jones became an all-pro in his third year. I mean, plenty of players do it. I'm not saying there's a Chris Jones.
Jay was in a different boat because his first year just really didn't count. They weren't expecting much from him. Again, he had the injury, the knee injury or whatever it was. And, so it was like that right away. If you have a knee injury, Brad Holmes likes you. I mean, that's automatic right there. It's the starting point.
He must have a tender ACL himself.
So he that first year didn't count for Jamo. It was a redshirt year. They all talked about it. And then the second year last year, obviously with the gambling thing, the suspension, the 6 games, and that didn't help. So his clock is a little bit different that way. But he should, if everything's normalish and he's not suspended, not hurt for the most part, and plays most of the season, they do need to see what they have from him, because this is the year. This is the year that you need to start seeing something. He doesn't have to have 1,000 yards, and he's cleaned up his drops, all these things. Whatever it is, if he just shows some upward, progress,
like he did,
I think that'll be
like
good.
He did late last season, right? He started making plays. Anyway, and that to me, that's what we should wrap this up. I mean, that's what they're banking on, that they've got young guys that are just going to keep getting better in lots of spots around the field, and they want to fill in around the margins. They did upgrade their cornerback position. Maybe not by a lot, or maybe obviously not by nearly as much as some wanted. And that's what they're banking on. Development, chemistry, another year with most of the same coaches, and their young guys getting better, and then they're filling in around that, and they're hoping that's enough, and we will see. We will see. It's not a terrible plan. I mean, Kansas City has Patrick Mahomes, but the reason their defense was so good is because they drafted well. I mean, that defense, they weren't as good the year before defensively, but those young guys got better. And it's interesting. Now, obviously, they have Chris Jones. There's no equivalent to that on the Lions. Although, who knows how good Hutchinson can be a year from now? I don't know. So that's the plan. We'll see. We'll see if it works.
My last comment I would say about this quarterback thing, the free agency and the draft and all that, is just that Holmes hasn't tried to draft an outside quarterback in 3 years. And he did really well with Brian Branch, it looks like. But so in free agency, he hasn't done great. And in the draft, he hasn't really tried. So when does that change? Or does he just believe that the position is cursed and they get hurt all the time? And what's the point? We're just going to not spend too much and risk too much at that position. And there's better ways to win. I don't know. He's not going to lay out that strategy for us, but that's the other thing is he needs to do something different at that position, because he hasn't so far. It hasn't really.
No, he just signed 2 of them, and we'll see if that makes a difference or not. One of them has an injury history again in Davis. They were better last year. That's just Mosley got hurt again. He hurt his ACL on one side. He'd already torn it previously on the other side, so that his fetish for that, or whatever you want to say. But here's the thing that gets lost. Cam Sutton was definitely an upgrade. He's a number 2. Right, and he had to play number 1. He had to go against the best guys.
Maybe as a number 2.
No, he was an upgrade from the year before. I mean, he's an okay player. He just was in a tough spot. He doesn't need to be on the.
He had a lot of pressure.
He doesn't need to be on the boundary side of the field, or wherever the number 1 is. Right. So he doesn't need to be guarding the number 1.
No,
he doesn't. And maybe that signing will look better if he's not. We'll see. I don't know. All right. let's get into your favorite thing. What do you say?
Yeah, that's an easy one. Is, being in Florida, I was running around and doing different things and, looking for stories and different things to write. And as I get older, Shawn, I know you're not like this, but, sometimes I just don't have a lot of energy. I just don't have a lot of motivation to do stuff. And I taken my golf clubs down there because I was hoping to play with Jim Leland. It didn't work out. So I just figured, whatever. And golf, as much as I really love golf, it takes a lot of time. It's 4 hours to play. It's another, hour round trip to get to the course and get there and prepare. It's a huge time investment. And I was ready to pack it in. I was like, okay, I'm going back the next day, whatever. And I just said, you know what? I drag my clubs down here and it's sunny and this is a waste. I need to come out and play. I need to not just sit around and do work or watch TV or do whatever, waste time in the house. So I went out, and I also thought, as I was leaving, I remember our Tigers beat writer, Evan Petzold, really is into golf. He's really gotten into it, and I've never played with him. I thought, you know what? I don't even know if he has those golf clubs down here. I didn't even ask him. He was in the house, and I said, hey, I'm setting up a tee time at this course. Do you want to play? And he said, absolutely. So we went out there, we met at the course, and we played. And it was fantastic. We only kind of got a late start, so we only played about 14 holes. But every time I run into Evan, we talk about golf, and he's telling me what he's working on and what he's doing, and maybe he have a question here or there for me. So we always just like talking about it. But Evan's turned into a pretty good golfer. I mean, he's, from what he told me where he was starting at, I think he was struggling to break 100 before, maybe last year or the year before that. But he's really gotten, I was impressed with his game. And it was fun to play with him. And I was really glad that I forced myself to not, to fight the entropy and get out there and do something and be social. And so it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed playing with Evan and spending some time with him outside of work. So that was my favorite thing last week.
Good word, entropy. Yeah, that sounds fun. Evan, for our listeners, maybe some of you listen to his podcast. Does it Restore the Roar?
There's only one podcast, Shawn, at the Free Press, and it's called Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn.
Okay, so we're back to Carlos and the conversation we had before. I'm not gonna bore you all with that. I'm not gonna bore you all with that. No, Evan is a sweetheart of a human being. He really is. And by the way, I wish I could play golf because I'd love to be on a golf course with you. I want to hear you talk about a sport that you know something about, and I think that would be awesome. I think that would be awesome. But no. You're like, yeah, I know you're whatever, all the other sports, whatever. But with golf, you actually like see golf and understand golf and you play and you're good at golf in a way that's different. That's your sport. That's what you see and you can anticipate and you understand and all that. And I would love to hear that from you. That'd be fun. Because here we are. We're talking about the Lions and whatever they should do, whatever. We're a couple of sports writers, We're just filling airtime and been putting out print, and it's fun, and we're grateful. But it's not like we're in a film room saying, "Here's why this guy's good, and here's why this guy was a mistake," and that's not how it works. But with golf, okay, how are the hands positioned? Oh, your hips or your shoulders, your feet,
Oh, I don't know that.
Yeah,
stuff.
you do. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. You understand all that.
You love the technicality of sport and how that you think that buys you legitimacy.
I don't think it buys legitimacy at all. No, I just want to understand.
There's different ways to appreciate and to be, insightful about sports. Not just if I'm not Tiger Woods' coach, then my opinion or observations are as worthy. People look at things differently. They look at it a technical way, and they look at it also within a context. And that's what coaches don't have. They don't have context. They just like, well, I know how you turn this way and you swivel your hip or whatever. You have the bend on the edge, and that's not very interesting.
No, but that's not true. That's all coaches have is context. Any good coach, that's what they have is context. All of it, because there's so many different parts and pieces to it. I just like to understand why a team is good, or why players are good, or why they struggle,
I'll tell you one
why
thing.
They struggle. Why they're you know what I mean.
I'll tell you one thing that I've heard over the years covering the Lions is I love to kind of go back and mention things of context about whatever. And over the years, I've definitely heard it from other people of like, because it's such a transient world, pro sports and coaching, and especially the NFL, people have no idea that something had happened 7 years ago. Like, what? How did that happen? And so, little things like that, I think, make it interesting to read what different, writers talk about and the context that they bring in sometimes of like,
after
why do they do that?
After the fact, when coaches and players or general managers, front office feel safer, or they're no longer there, and there's not as much pressure, or they're not worried about losing their job or whatever, then you understand something. You're like, oh, that's why that happened. Because you don't know. That's sort of my point. And yeah, it's great when you see those pieces that look back, because then you really know. And it makes you realize when you're going through it, how little you know. I mean, that's how I would think about those things. It's humbling in a way, because sometimes it can come down to there's somebody walking down a hall, or somebody goes into somebody's office and they have a conversation, and that changes the course of a season for that particular player or that coach. Hey, I hadn't thought about it this way, whatever. And we just don't, that's the kind of stuff that often doesn't get out until much later. And it helps explain why things.
Until someone has to cover their butt, they have to explain it. Like, oh, that's why it happened.
Or just, whether it's bad or good. But anyway, no, that would be my favorite thing is being out on a golf course with you and getting those lessons, so to speak.
Wait, your favorite thing is something that hasn't happened? No, you can't do that. You can't project into the future.
No, that would be my favorite thing is to listen to you talk about golf. I think that would be good.
When I play golf, I don't talk about golf. I just play golf.
No, but you could.
I usually drink something
you
too.
could talk about a shot you hit and why or whatever, and it'd be great.
Yeah. I'm gonna do it with the Windsor boys. How about that?
Yeah, that'd be great. That would definitely be my favorite thing. So that's my favorite thing. I think that's great. Along with the Juicy Lucy at Matt's Bar in Minneapolis. It's a neighborhood south of downtown. It's been there forever. They put the cheese in the middle of the burger. I haven't had a burger in a while. You bite into it, it's like queso oozing out in the middle. It's just really simple. Onion, pickle, probably use the American cheese. Some places might use cheddar. This particular bar, started the craze 50, 60 years ago. You can get them all over Minneapolis now, but Matt's is the original. It's an old working class bar. It's really great.
I suggest that you do something else, because you always like to do these off the beaten path. I discovered this restaurant.
I didn't discover
this cool
that
little thing that's been there forever.
This place is an institution. I didn't discover that.
Yeah. So you will, but what you should do to break the mold is go to the Mall of America, ride the roller coaster, and get a Whopper with extra cheese at Burger King. That's the food.
Why would I do that? I've already done that.
That's what real people do.
But I've already done that.
They don't go get Juicy Lucy's.
I've already done that.
You ridden the roller coaster?
Yeah, with when my kids were little. The Snoopy coaster. Yeah.
All right, that's my
I've
favorite
stayed in a hotel here with an ice skating rink. I mean, I've done plenty of that. Matt's is where real people go.
By the way,
and who are real people? That don't sound like a certain,
real.
Yeah, don't say that. Don't say that. Everybody's real.
By the way, before Robin, I'm surprised Robin Shannon hasn't come on and, whatever, scolded us, which we deserve. But for the record, it's called, this is like corrections on PCI. It's called Days of Roar is our Tigers podcast, and it features obviously Evan and Mark Gorosh. I've been on the podcast before.
Well, I'm going to call Restore. I'm going to call it Restore the Roar. I'm going to campaign.
Isn't that? Wait a minute. What was ours called? Didn't we change? Oh, it was a road
to the something or other. I don't know.
Road to the playoff.
All right, man. Let's get out of here.
Restore the Roar.
Yeah.
It's probably already. There's probably already a podcast.
Days of Roar. Days of Roar. The Pistons Pulse. And I think there's some people that talk about Michigan sports too. Pretty good people.
By the way, one quick plug for Days of Roar, and I'm sure they're talking about it, and they had Jason Benetti on and all that, the new Tigers play-by-play guy for Valley Sports. But Jackson Jobe had a very impressive.
He's got some heat, doesn't he?
Great for relief.
I saw.
Got some heat. Got some nasty stuff. That slider is great. He pitched the ninth inning to close out a 1-0 to win. It was just, this is the guy. And by the way, I love it that I was there for a week or so, and then I get back and Miguel Cabrera shows up and Jackson Jobe makes his debut. So it's like, great. let's save it for
you didn't
one.
need to. You wrote a really good piece about Benetti. That was great. I think I hopefully I messaged you.
But I wanted to see Jackson.
Hopefully I messaged you about that. I don't know if I did, but in any case, yeah, days.
You probably thought about it and like, no, this guy's head's too big.
It depends on the day, your mood, how you're feeling, how your stuff's doing. Do I need to troll or not? I mean, if you have too much success, you're not going to like it, and then you're going to say, oh, "Screw it, hey, I know a lot more than Brad Holmes." You're going to write one of those kind of columns, which are always, I'm not sure what the word is.
Look for it coming soon, by the way.
Oh yeah, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine your logic and because your football knowledge, football knowledge is so deep and there's so much depth there. Yeah, it'll be, and I'm sure you've done your research. I'm sure you've done your history on what teams do and this is how it works. I'm sure you've done all of that. That'll be great. So that's actually my new favorite thing. All right. Let's get out of here. Let's thank people.
Yeah, let's thank. You said one person's going to listen to the podcast is going to be Robin Chan, our producer. So I'd like to thank him for being a loyal listener and a subscriber. Please, Robin, when you get to where you find our podcast, rate us, subscribe, and leave a comment, but not a mean one like you normally do. And our executive producers, Kirkland Crawford and Anjanette Delgado, and your press editor, Nicole Avery Nichols. And Shawn, if Robin wants some friends, who else should we thank?
Well, the listeners, of course. Thanks for staying with us. We are going to be a little shorter today than we weren't. I blame Robin Chan for that. I think it's time we start holding our producer accountable. You know what I mean? I know. All right. We thank all those folks. We're grateful for work. I'm sure a lot of readers think, okay, what do you have on those people? Why do they keep employing y'all? And I don't blame people for thinking that. I certainly understand that. And if there's a cornerback column coming out, I'm sure folks are going to think that even. We will. Oh, because I'm sure there's going to be so much smarts and logic in it. It makes me tingly thinking about that. All right. Who else, Carlos? Oh, where do we find this?
Where do you find any podcast on Spotify or Apple or MySpace or CompuServe.com? I don't know. Wherever you find them. Find us, rate us, subscribe, and tell Shawn Windsor what you think about him.
CompuServe. That's a good metaphor for the era of your column. That is
AOL.
Top Gun, CompuServe. I think that's great. Okay, moving to the 2020s. You can do that. I know you can do it.
Soon.
That will be my all-time favorite. That will be my all-time favorite thing. All right, my man. Good to see you. Glad you're back, home and safe. And pleasure as always.
Enjoy Minneapolis and the Snoopy coaster.
Yeah. Will do. I'll look for a show here too. Maybe there's some aging new age punk rockers that are still around. That'd be fun. All right. Until next week when we're back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. We'll probably talk a little college basketball next week. Obviously the Red Wings are struggling, so we'll talk about that too. But until next week, right, Carlos?
Yes.
All right. See you. See y'all. Thank y'all.